All right, everybody. It's new comic book day. House of X just hit the shelves. House of X number 5. Wow, there's a lot of stuff in here we need to get to. So let's dive in. Welcome back to Longbox Diving, where we explore comics and story arcs pulled from the long box. And we're talking about House of X number 5. Look at that thing. Fantastic. All right. So, House of X number 5. Hickman does it again. Man, it's just... Right. Well, granted, there's not a lot of action in the story, but there's so much future growth potential in the story and plot threads that we see through this that it's kind of staggering. It's really amazing, the stuff that he's put in here. That it's like, wow. And not just, here's a thing. It's here's a thing, and here's how that thing works, which is just amazing. So we start out with Lorna and Magneto kind of sitting up, looking at this, what they call the resurrection machine, and it looks like a tree, and it's part of Krakoa, growing up within the island. And yes, I said resurrection machine. And in come these 5 people, which is kind of interesting because we're on Krakoa. We had 5 original X-Men, and that's where they disappeared at, was Krakoa. So it's just kind of, there's so many underlying throwbacks to things that Hickman is doing that's just fantastic to see. And then we see these 5 come in, and one of them happens to be Fabio Medina. Now, it was funny because I was just poking fun of this dude in the Bendis run on Twitter because he makes little golden balls. That was his power. Little golden balls. Not gold balls, but balls that look like gold, and they're not really anything. And so, but here Hickman takes that idea and says, hey, this dude makes little golden balls, but what they really are is inert eggs. Not viable eggs. And so he comes in and he spits out these eggs, several, I think there's like 7 or 8 eggs, right? And then Kevin McTaggart shows up, Proteus. Now, Proteus can warp reality. We've seen him so many times in X-Men comics. And he comes and warps the reality of the eggs and makes them viable. And then, interesting point, Proteus's powers typically feed on the destruction of his body and with the use of his power. So the more he uses it, the quicker he destroys himself. And they actually have to clone him about once a week or so using Xavier's DNA because, he is his father, and putting Xavier's or Proteus's mind back in there, which we'll get to, but they have to clone him off of Xavier's body about once a week unless he's really using his powers, and it's like once a day. So then we have Joshua Foley, which is known as Elixir, who has the ability to heal things, and he touches the eggs and starts the process of cellular regeneration and replication and the process of getting the egg to be fertilized and viable. And then we have Eva Bell, who can control time, and she does that by putting a bubble around the thing, and she can control the time within the bubble, speed it up or slow it down, depending on what she needs to do. And she's actually speeding it up to the growth of when they should be hatched, which is usually their adult or when they die body, that time period. So they come like right back. It's amazing. Now, Hope Summers is also there. She's the 5th person, and she unifies all their powers, gets them to work together, and then she also to enhance their powers to make them to the fullest level of what they're able to do. It's interesting because we also have the whole Messiah storyline that ties into Hope Summers being the Messiah and the savior of the mutant race. And Hickman ties that back in. It's just amazing. So now, when they're hatched... So now mutants are hatched. They're still mammals, at least, I think. They're hatched, but they're just a husk. There's nothing here, right? And so Cerebro, and then we find out Cerebro itself does more than just find mutants. It actually stores their brain patterns and their memories and their personalities in like a backup. So Xavier backs them up mentally. They're who they are and stores it, and it says in some of the reading that it stores it up in multiple places, so there's multiple redundant backups of all the brain patterns of all these mutants. And apparently he may have like the brain powers of a lot of different mutants. I don't know how many. I think it says later that he can only handle about 6,000 minds, or less than 6,000 minds a day. So, or it would take 6,000 for him to do something. But well, I'll get to that in a second. So he takes those personalities, he puts it back into the body of these people, and we see that it's the mutants that died in that last issue. So, I have to give the shout out to the other comic reviewers who called for cloning off the last issue, though I am not sure if it was the clones that died up there or the originals, but we know the ones that are here in this book right now are clones. Also, we note that they have put a note in there saying they have not tried actually putting the mind thought patterns of one mutant into the husk of another mutant. I wonder, future story plot? It'd be interesting. Hickman's laying a lot of these extra story plots out there. It sounds fantastic. So I have to, I have said the process they said would ramp up. If they ramped it up to the 30,000 mutants a week, then it would take about 10 years to return all the mutants that died in Genosha. But it would also take Xavier to back up 6,000 minds a day, which he couldn't do unless he had a group of telepaths who were all trained to use Cerebro. That may be another plot thread that coming up. They're trying to ramp up to that. I don't know. They've mentioned the death and the Genosha's death and all these other comics. It'd be interesting. We also then go through a couple pages where they're introducing the X-Men that died to the people of Krakoa and the 5 heroes of Krakoa. Not a lot here other than they're shouting mutant and like I know them, we're brother, and it's more of a traditional reintegration to society and a celebration that they're kind of setting a foundation for the way their society will work, which is something that Magneto talks to Lorna about. Is that this is one thing we did get from humans as society. So we see Magneto talking to Xavier and said, hey, you know what? The humans should have killed us when they had the chance. Wow. Again, why? What are they planning that makes it mutants so threatening to humankind? In so much that Magneto's like, hey, they should have went ahead and taken care of us. But all right, so there's another note here. It talks about the resurrection normally takes about 48 hours, and there are protocols put in place to make sure that they don't create duplicates and things don't mess up. Now, there's two parts of this that were noted in here. There's the note that with the word force capitalized, conventions will become necessary to supersede the protocols. Plot thread. We get to a point where we're starting to replicate people really quick. Also, they're talking about a group will be needed to investigate missing mutants or mutant homicides to figure out if they're really dead before they create another duplicate. That, to me, that would be an interesting book, and I hope that actually is one of the books coming up because I would actually really, really enjoy reading that. And then we see Xavier and Emma. They're at the United Nations, and they have just got Krakoa, the mutant nation, declared a nation. And it did take some pushing from Emma on one of the UN ambassadors. And the conversation we see that pushing or compulsion actually leaves a mark on the pusher as well as the person being influenced to do this thing. Now, and he says, thank you, Emma, for doing that, taking that burden. So now Emma says, hey, don't think of it, hey, just make me a governor. And Xavier says, this. He says, I have bolder things in mind. What, Hickman? What has he got in mind? That's going to be so good. Okay. We then see like a map of all nations that are dissenting nations, or we consider dissenting nations, to the idea of having a mutant nation. We got Russia and Latvia. We got some Middle Eastern countries. We have Brazil, South American country. So it's interesting where that's going to come into play later is, the countries that do not accept them as a nation and then those countries that do. So back, and then actually list why, political, religious, etc. Interesting stuff. So back on Krakoa, we actually see that a lot of the mutant, so I would call them mutant holdouts. A lot of them are more on the evil bent, villainous bent side of things. But they have come through the portal to Krakoa, apparently to swear allegiance to the mutant nation. And it's really, this was cool. So like we see Random and Wild Child, we see Sinister, we see Lady Mastermind, and there's some others in here I don't recognize that I'm sure somebody out there will tell me who they are. Tell me, put it in a comment. We can see Implate, Monet's brother, Pennis's brother. We see Exodus, we see Silver Samurai, Callisto, etc. But we also see Morrow and Frenzy in a later panel. It was very cool. And I'm sure somebody knows and can pick out the rest of those. And then we see Apocalypse. And he comes out through the portal, and he's like stops and says hi to Krakoa. Now, remember from the last issue, we actually saw he knew Krakoa. He actually helped save Krakoa. He ended up defeating whatever hordes were coming up from below with the Twilight's horde. He was there to fight it and left his horsemen there. So here we see Apocalypse there, and Apocalypse and all these other mutants swear allegiance to the mutant nation. And then we see, it says that he's like very, very proud of the mutant kind. This is what I've always wanted, what I thought we could always become. Look at you all, you've done it, you've succeeded, you've made it. We're finally a mutant nation. This is great. I still, being an X-Men fan for a long time, I still don't trust Apocalypse. I still don't trust Sinister. Something's going to happen. I just don't know what it is yet. But we do see in the future that, Apocalypse does sacrifice himself for the information against Nimrod. So maybe he is being true, or maybe Sinister's not. I don't know. But very cool stuff. Then we get into the final panel where after they all swear allegiance, Apocalypse and Xavier is shaking hands and say, hey, Krakoa's for all mutants. Cool. Man, I'll tell you what, I am really, really excited about the direction of X-Men right now, what Hickman's doing. And I can't wait for these individual books and all the plot threads that are just going to span out, and seeing who's writing these books and the stories and the art and the previews look fantastic. So I can't wait for that to come out. So this is a fantastic story. It was fantastic art. It was just beautiful. Hickman's writing is Hickman Larraz, the art, just Hickman's blowing my mind. The art's I can't say much about it. It's so much. I'm losing my words for all this. It is very fantastic, very worth the buy. You need to get it. You need to get all of them, and you need to get them soon before they skyrocket in price. You need to get them, put them in your box, because this is the kind of stuff you're going to want to reread over and over and over again as we get into these new books. You're like, okay, where did this come from? Boom, right in here. Read that. So definitely recommend. Now, if you like this review, please like and subscribe. And we will see you here again next time in the Lockbox.